And with that being said, Teddy, you are our next awesome guest to talk about how we are simplifying data quality at OpenMetadata.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you very much, Aitem, for the kind word, and thanks, Perry, for the introduction. So let me share my screen. So, well, today in our webinar, we are going to, show you and walk through how we can easily and effortlessly, build and deploy, monitoring and data quality test inside the OpenMetadata without any technical knowledge, basically using no code. So before we dive into that demo, I would like to give a bit of a word about the vision that we have in the data quality and observability team, right? So that's why we wake up every morning and why we do what we do. Basically, it's articulated around three main pillars, right? We want to deliver high quality and reliable data. So that's basically data that you can trust and data that you can depend on, right? So we all have had to do manual validation, as a data scientist, data analyst before building a dashboard, developing a model, and spending, hours validating assumption about our data, right? And that time, that lack of dependence and reliability of data, that takes away time from what's our core value, right? Deploying model, building dashboard, giving analytics to management and leaders in the organization, right? The second pillar is to overcome people and tool disconnect, and that's one that's very, very close to my heart, because in my previous experience where I worked as a data engineer, we were actually organized in ship. So we were engineers deployed inside, business teams. And so we actually spent weeks, 2 different teams working on implementing data quality solution, using different tools, conducting, leading different projects to realize, when it was time to actually deploy it. And we had, kind of a sync up across the domain that we spent, 3-4 weeks working on the exact same tool and basically wasting resources, right? Because we had that disconnect of tools. We didn't have one centralized tool that was the source of truth. We didn't have a centralized place to have that information, and we had that silo inside the organization where we had that disconnect, basically. And then the final pillar is, that ambition to empower leaders, in the organization with trustworthy data. I'm sure everyone or most of the people here have, work many hours providing data for management, for marketing team, finance team, crunching the data, sharing those data, to realize 2, 3, 4 days later that, there had been a glitch in a data processing pipeline. And then, we provided data that were not fully trustworthy, right? And then we have to go in front of our manager and tell them that, explain them, that they may have made a decision based on data that were, not fully trusted. And then we're losing that trust that we need to establish between management and the data that lives inside the organization, right? So those pillars are why we, wake up every morning and try to provide, the best solution for the different personas in the organization, right? And so now the next logical step is, how do we do that, right? How did we do that? So at OpenMetadata, if you've been here, since the early days, you probably already know that, but those are very important elements, right? So we started OpenMetadata with metadata in mind, right? So when we go to OpenMetadata, the first step that you have to do is to ingest the metadata about your data assets. And we take that approach because metadata gives you the context that you need to then collaborate, develop application, and understand what's happening around your data assets, right? And as Haitham mentioned, we've built the platform, the application, with a very rich API, right? So every action that you are taking inside the OpenMetadata user interface is basically an API code that is being sent. And what those two elements allows us to do is to easily develop and build application around metadata, right? And then the final step is, oftentimes tools that have been developed, they've been developed from an engineering perspective, right? So you can think about those tools that, requires you to set up some YAML configuration, right? Or be the dataset owner where you actually know the connection, the different connection detail to be able to run your data quality tests, right? And so what we really try to emphasize and how we want to approach it is to have a friendly user interface, right? Where people with different skills inside the organization, but knowledge about the data, knowledge about the domain, can come and contribute into defining, what are going to be the data quality standard for that specific asset, right? So those three elements are how we are doing it, right? And so this translates into, that data quality and profiling application inside the organization, right? And inside the observability team, we like to think about the profiler not just as a tool to profile your data and understand how many rows you have, right? But we like to think about it as the entry point into your quality journey, right? By profiling your data, you can already validate certain assumptions that you may have from your data, right? And so already by just taking that first step and profiling your data, you've eliminated potentially that manual validation, right? So you can go ahead, profile, check, does my column has unique values for, this table, are the null constraints respected? So already here, by just running that profiling ingestion workflow, you are able to eliminate potentially one step in the manual validation journey that you may have, right? And then once you've done that, to go one step further is to implement the quality workflow that we provide inside OpenMetadata, right? And what we have a suite of native tests that will cover different dimensions, such as completeness, uniqueness, validity, that allows you to implement assertions, and run those insertions on a scheduled, on a defined schedule. And then from there, you can set up your alert, so that you can pick up any test failure that may happen inside the platform and be alerted, right away, so that you don't wait for the data consumer to face the error that they may be facing, but you are, proactively actually acting and understanding what's happening within your data, right? And then once we have all of this, we aggregate that information, and we'll go through the demo. We'll go through all of those different elements. But we aggregate all of that information and all of the assertions that are running inside your platform, so that you can have a global view of how is the health of my data sources, how's the health of my data platform, how many tests do I have failing, what's my percentage of success rate, so that you are able to see it not only at the table level, but also at the platform level, right? And then we even went one step further in that previous release, where we implemented that resolution workflow, which is the first iteration of it, where now when a test fails, your team can come and mark a test as acknowledged, right? So that the next, consumer that may notice some error when consuming the data can come and actually look into OpenMetadata, see the failures that has been happening against my platform, see, okay, this person has acknowledged it, so it's being worked on. And then you can mark it as resolved, so that your user know that, okay, the test failure is now resolved, and you can see why it actually failed and add a comment, so that you have context around failure and people can come back and understand why this failed in the past and how it was resolved, right? And then we also made it extensible, because we know that we have business user in mind, but we know that engineer will want to extend it, so we provide easy way to integrate with different third-party tools to implement custom SQL tests to extend the native tests that are available inside the platform. So those are all the different elements that we are implementing to solve the data quality and observability problem. So now that we've went over the slide, we are going to jump into the demo. So give me 1 second. I will stop sharing for a second. All right, and let me share again. All right, can you see my screen?
Yes.
All right, awesome. So for those of you that are new to OpenMetadata, so this is the landing page that the page you will be landing once you log into the platform. So you'll be able to see the activity feed of things happening inside the platform. You can just check at the threads where you've been mentioned, the tasks that have been assigned to you, or you can check all the threads that have been happening inside the platform. And then at the bottom, you'll have a summary of the structure of your data platform, where you'll see how many assets do you have, what is the distribution of asset per category, and then you'll be able to see how you are faring against the KPIs that you have defined, right? So we have description coverage and ownership coverage KPIs that you can set. Feel free to browse the documentation. You'll have more information there. And then finally, you have the data that you own in the box right here. So for that specific demo, what interests us is the customer table right here, right? So I've ingested some metadata from my Redshift customer table. So that customer table basically aggregates orders and define LTV of my customer at the customer level, right? So people came here, fill out the description, added some tags, so they provided context around the metadata, right? But what interests us is the profiler and data quality tab, right? So in the profiler and data quality tab, so I've set up a profiler ingestion workflow. So we'll share the link to the documentation if you are interested to understanding how to create that workflow, but it's fairly easy. You do it through the user interface. No need to enter and to have any technical knowledge. It's just click a few buttons and you are good. So I've been ingesting, running my profiler workflow for a few days now. And so when I land on that page, what I can see is different metrics, right? So I can see, how many rows do I have in my table? How has this count of rows been evolving, across a time frame? So I'm able to change that time frame. So I can check just for yesterday, or I can pick a date range. Then I will have how many columns do I have? What is the size of my data inside my table? And when was this table created, right? And then at the bottom, I will have that time series graph of different actions. So I will have the data volume that will be represented, so I can see how the volume is evolving across a period. And then I will be able to see the DDL operations that have been realized against that table, right? So here I can see I had 2 operations, 1 insert and 1 update that happened on the 6th and then on the 5th, and that 7 rows were inserted and 2 rows were updated, right? And then just from that graph, you're already able to understand certain pattern and visualize how your data is evolving as a structure inside your table. Now, what's interesting is we have the same vision, the same view, but at the column level, right? So at the column level, I will have a summary of metrics for every column. At the top, I still have that summary of metrics for my table, right? And then when I click and go inside a column, then I will have a more detailed view of what's happening inside that column, right? So here I have my customer ID column. So I will expect it to have no null value, right? So I have no null value. So that's validation, that's good. Then I have a unique, I would expect all the keys to be unique. So unique count is 117. I have 100% of unique value. So already I know that this column to me looks good and I can, validate that aspect. Then we will provide different metrics, so date range, quartile, and data distribution, right? What's interesting is, we're going to provide metrics for different data type, right? So for example, for varchar characters, you'll also be able to view those null corner proportion metric, etc. But what can be interesting for people who are doing some NLP or text analysis is that we will be profiling the length of the string that are stored inside the database, right? So we'll be showing you what's the max, what's the mean, what's the minimum. And then we'll be also showing you what's the distribution of the character length inside your column, right? So that already, as a data scientist or someone working on text analysis, you're able to have a sense of the structure of your data, right? And then another interesting example here is going to be the number of orders. So for the number of orders, we will expect it to be greater than 0, right? We cannot have negative order. That's a fair assumption. But then already here, we're seeing that we have a number of order that is lower than 0, right? So from here, what we can do, ideally, we want to be able to automate those checks, right? It's interesting for us to come and see how the data is structured and how, I'm interacting with my data, right? But ideally, I want to run those assertions on a schedule, and then I will want to be able to, get alerted when something goes wrong, that is not expected, right? So that whole action happens in the data quality tab, right? So here I already have 10 tests that have been running for a few days, right? So already I can see that half of them have failed, right? And so what's interesting to see is the type of test that we have set up, right? So here we have a custom SQL test that has been running, right? Where we're checking that no orders inside our table is lower than a specific date, and then yet we see that we are getting some dates that are lower than that. So there is something that's not right here for that test. And what's interesting, I'm going to show you tests that will be more business-oriented type of tests, right? So that here we can imagine someone from business with that domain knowledge coming here and creating that test. And then there are tests that will be more on the data engineering side, where you want to do some sanity checks that, the assumption on a technical basis, technical definition of your data sets are met, right? And that's what we are able to provide. We're able to provide both. And with that user interface, we're able to allow people from different backgrounds to come and act on setting up those tests, right? So another test that is very interesting to me, it's that daily order to be between, right? So we can imagine a scenario where we're expecting daily orders to be between X and Y, right? So that we want to make sure that nothing is going on our platform, right? So here again, we have a more business-oriented test. And then here, what we have to do, it's very simple. We just have to pick the mean and the max value. Then we have to pick a column inside the table that has a date or timestamp field. Then we will pick a date range and then an interval. And then our test will simply run assertion against the previous date to check that we're meeting the criteria that we have defined, right? And then similarly on more technical definition of data assets, we can check that columns are not nulls, columns are unique, etc. But basically, I'm showing you those different tests to show you how we're able to meet the different needs for all of the personas inside the platform, inside the organization, sorry. And then one thing that I want to add and highlight, it's right now we're using Redshift as an example, but you can use it today you can go ahead and use OpenMetadata data quality test with all of the database connectors that are available inside the platform. So let me show you how you create a test, right? That's very interesting. So you maybe wonder, maybe we have to fill out some YAML file or some JSON config file. While you do not, you simply have to click, and that's it. So we'll go ahead and pick a column test. So let's pick our customer ID column. And what's interesting in that view, as you can see, that we have some context that is being brought directly, inside the test definition, so that we can understand what type of data we're working with, right? So here we'll go ahead and then we'll pick, let's say we'll do another not null test, and then we'll submit it, and then that's it. We've created our test, right? Now we have our workflow that is created, right? It's scheduled to be run, at a certain time after the table has been updated. And then from there, it will run the next time. And then that's it. That's the only thing that you have to do when you want to create a test, right? And as I mentioned in the presentation earlier, you're able to come and acknowledge a test that has failed, so that you can say, okay, I know that happened, I'm working on it, or you can mark it as resolved and then pick a reason for the failure and then add a comment so that user inside your organization can come and get that information, right? Okay, so now we've defined our test. Then the next step, we want to be alerted when that test fails, right? So we'll go ahead in the setting and then in the alert. So I've already created one, but let's go ahead and create a new one, right? So I'll call that test demo. For the trigger, I will pick test case, right? And then for the filter, I will pick test results. I want to get the failed one, right? And then I just want to get the test failure for my Redshift table, customers table, right? Which is this one. And then I can pick which source I want to receive my test from, right? So we support most of the communication channel. And the one that's very interesting is the webhook, right? Maybe you have some technical team inside your organization that want to implement a specific workflow, right? So if you set up a webhook, we'll send a payload to the webhook endpoint, and then your technical team can process it and do whatever needs to be done, on their side. So we won't save it because we already have that one that has been created, right? So we have a webhook to a Slack channel. And let me show you what that looks like. Okay. All right. Perfect. So you can see I run, my assertion this morning, and then I received that test notification with a link, running direct. That if you click on it, it will direct you to that entity, and you'll be able to visualize where my test failed, where your test failed, right? So that's all there is to it, right? It's very simple to create tests inside OpenMetadata, yet it's very powerful, right? You're able to extend it. You're able to have all of your users from different technical background in the organization come and define the data contract inside the organization, right? And so now what's coming next, because that's not where we're stopping, right? We want to keep pushing and go even further into solving that observability and quality issue, right? So we'll be working on implementing a resolution center, which will be an enhanced view of your test failure where you can assign task and define approval workflow. For Collate, we'll be going into the anomaly detection space to be able to use intelligent model to automatically report on abnormal volume and freshness. And then finally, we'll be implementing on the Collate side as well automated test suggestion using ML-based pattern detection so that we can understand has your data in structure and suggest the test to you before the failure happened and you have to implement the test after the fact. Right. So I hope you enjoyed the presentation, Now, if we have time, we can take some questions.
For example, if I have, for example, the pattern test for all my assets, for example, I have the unique column for all my tables. Is it possible to do if using API or something like made it easy? For example, I have 3 tables that is the same test. By your example, you go to the table and you write the test and run the test. It's possible to put one test for 3 tables, for example, or not. It's not possible yet.
Yeah, so if you are thinking about bulk action, bulk edits and bulk addition and whatnot, it's currently not supported.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, but we are working more broadly on the OpenMetadata side to implement bulk action, and I believe in 1.2 we will have some bulk action available on the metadata side, if I'm not mistaken.
I think so. I can to do an automation by using my internal automation to create this function in my side. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Yeah, Rahul.
Hey, Teddy and OpenMetadata team. Great presentation. You're solving many problems for many people. So great work. I mean, because you presented about data quality, I come with some questions specifically to the data quality. So one question is about, do you have any plan to have more visualization of data quality by dimensions? Because you mentioned about dimension, but right now it's not there. So are we going to have, I mean, as a user can see, okay, I have completeness rule 100, how many of them fell across entire tables, and slices by data domain, because you guys are going to have data domain as part of the tool itself in the roadmap. So let's say I have a data domain, my finance data domain, I have 100 table, 1000 test by completeness 20, something like that. And that's how I can slice and dice my data quality. So that's the one question about that. Second question is about, we do have lineage as part of OpenMetadata data cataloging. If my data quality alert happen on a table or a column, right, can that be propagated down the lineage, and then the consumer of those tables, which are the owner of those tables, can also get notified?
Yes, so those are two good questions. The answer is yes and yes. It's on the roadmap, right? So having an enhanced visualization of data quality inside the platform is on the roadmap. It will be on the Collate roadmap, if I'm not mistaken. Harsha, on that, you can interrupt me if I'm saying something incorrect. And as far as propagating failure downstream to based on the lineage information, yes, that is something that's on the roadmap and that we will implement as well. Yeah.
Great. Then let's keep it here. If you sleep through this and you watch the webinar and you have any questions tomorrow, that's completely fine. Go to Slack. You can ask the questions there as well. So thank you very much, Teddy, for the presentation. And thank you to all of you for being here, for sharing this time with us, for your questions. And I will see you in Slack. I will see you hopefully in some issues, some PRs, or otherwise we'll see you next month. Thank you.